In this video, we break down the strange pattern of giant discoveries across history and why so many of them seem to disappear after one specific institution gets involved.
Let's dive into the giants.
Giants are fun. And where do you want to start? The beginning?
Yeah.
Giants are in every culture's history.
The idea of giants isn't isolated to one religion or region. It appears globally, across civilizations that had no contact with each other. That's why some researchers see it as a pattern worth investigating.
Every culture's got giants mentioned. Ancient Indian Vedas, Native Americans, island of Malta, East Asian. Every culture has giants. And the Bible, of course. Epic of Gilgamesh. So giants show up all through our culture. And whenever I see that, a lot of what I do is just pattern recognition.
He's not claiming proof. He's pointing out repetition across history.
Now, as for giants is tricky because we don't have any hard evidence, but we have a lot of circumstantial evidence, where the most recent would probably be late 19th century, early 20th, where you just had these discoveries all over America, over 1,000 of them.
This is where the story shifts, from mythology to reported discoveries.
These amateur archaeologists finding giant bones. And the story is always the same, is this guy's, he's digging and he's desecrating a Native American burial mound, finds these giant bones, calls the Smithsonian, they come over, they investigate, they take the bones, they go back, and then it disappears.
Newspaper archives from the late 1800s do contain hundreds of reports describing oversized skeletons. The debate is whether these were exaggerations, hoaxes, or something misidentified.
Like that happens over and over through these stories, is the Smithsonian conspiracies always involve. But
So are you saying the Smithsonian hides evidence of giants?
I'm saying that the conspiracy theory is that the Smithsonian hides evidence of a lot of things. The Smithsonian, of which I'm a huge fan of, we don't see the kind of the dark underside of the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian, I think the first director might have been John Wesley Powell. I could be fact-checked on that. Who was, he spent a lot of time with Native Americans.
Quick correction here. John Wesley Powell was not the first director of the Smithsonian Institution. That title actually goes to Joseph Henry, who led the Smithsonian from its founding in the mid-1800s. Powell came later, and his role was different. Powell led the first official U.S. government-sponsored expedition through the Grand Canyon, and later headed the Smithsonian's Bureau of Ethnology, where he played a major role in documenting and studying Native American languages, cultures, and societies.
He respected them. He saw them as very intelligent and resourceful. So they were well represented in the Smithsonian, but then he sees Native cultures as Native Americans as not as subhuman. He called them specimens. He would put like their body parts on display and stuff. Look at these Native American specimens.
Early anthropology in the U.S. often treated indigenous people as subjects rather than equals, leading to controversial collections of remains and artifacts.
So there'd be all these discoveries of these amazing mounds, like the Serpent Mound in Ohio, and all this stuff all around the country. And the Smithsonian would say there must have been another advanced race here because Native Americans are they're savages. They couldn't never build this.
This reflects a now discredited belief that Native Americans couldn't have built large structures.
And that became kind of embedded in the Smithsonian for a long, long time, is this isolationist theory is what they called it. I'm just trying to set up that there are forces that want to keep certain things away from us.
Mm-hmm.
He's building the case that information control, not just giants, is the bigger theme.
There's an initiative right now to have the Smithsonian catalog and make public everything they have there, which I don't think is going anywhere. The Smithsonian gets very strange carve-outs of laws. There was a law passed not too long ago which required all museums to return anything that was of value to Native American cultures back to the tribes, especially if it was funeral.
This refers to repatriation laws like NAGPRA, which require institutions to return human remains and sacred objects to Native tribes.
Anything that have to do like funeral, whatever it's called, death rights or whatever. to return all that stuff. So this law is passed. The museums have to do all that. But specifically, it says in line after line, Smithsonian is exempt. Smithsonian doesn't count. Smithsonian doesn't have to do any of this. So they don't have to respond to any of it.
That exemption is what raises eyebrows for a lot of people.
So then we go back to Grand Canyon or the Giants, and we don't really know. It's hard to know what's true because there's over 1,000 reports in newspapers of these findings. But the mainstream narrative is it was giants were cool at the time. It was hoaxes, and it was just to make money.
This is the official explanation. Sensationalism sold newspapers.
But it's just too many coincidences. And there's one giant story that's interesting because it overlaps several cultures, native cultures, where you've got in like the Mississippi Valley, they have these Indian myths about these giants they're cannibals.
Multiple Native American tribes share legends of large, hostile beings, often described as cannibalistic and driven out by united tribes.
So they're eating the people, and they get driven west by the tribes. They unite and drive them west into like Nevada and California, and they end up at what's known as Lovelock Cave. And the Lovelock Cave giants are famous giants. They're the red-haired giants.
This is one of the most well-known American giant stories.
So the story goes that they're at war with all these tribes, and during the war, when the natives are falling, they're like eating them in the battlefield. So it unites the tribes, and they drive them into Lovelock Cave, and they seal the cave, and they set fire to the whole place.
Lovelock Cave in Nevada is a real archaeological site where artifacts, including large sandals and unusual remains, were reportedly found.
An archaeologist goes in there and finds sandals that are like size 29 and these giant clothes that, like, I'm not making this part up. You can go see this. Like, why is there a sandal that's this size that are all found in the cave, and bones and red hair? But, and all that stuff has been sent back, and then it's just gone. I think they have almost 1 billion artifacts that we can't see. And I just want to know what they are.
Now the focus shifts from giants to access.
So all those giant bones that were found, okay, I'm sure 99% of them are hoaxes. And maybe there's 0.5% that were mastodon bones that were misidentified. But what happened in Lovelock Cave? We know stuff was in there because there was a tribal leader, a woman who became kind of a famous author. She had red hair woven into like some of her traditional garb. And she said it's from the Lovelock Giants.
Oral history plays a major role here. Claims passed down through generations, even when physical evidence is missing.
Like, where did she get that red hair? So I'm not saying it's real. I'm just saying I would like to know what's the chain of custody there. So there's just a lot of those.
I mean, this all came from biblical stuff, though, correct?
Yeah. So the biblical giants, you don't see much of them in the canonical Bible. The Nephilim are mentioned once.
We've covered the archaeology, but now we're going to dive into scripture.
And I could talk about them a little bit. But we learn more about giants when the Book of Enoch is discovered. And the Book of Enoch was discovered when, like, an adventurer, I forget when it was, maybe 18th century, was looking for the source of the Nile River, which was kind of a big deal at the time. And he found it. And it was somewhere in Ethiopia. And he gets to know the locals there, and they're Ethiopian Jews that have been there for 3,000 years. So he's friendly with them. They take him up to their, whatever you call it, their church, and he sees this giant book, Book of Enoch, the Book of Giants, all this other stuff.
The Book of Enoch is an ancient Jewish text not included in most modern Bibles, but preserved in Ethiopian tradition.
So you have Genesis that starts, but in this expanded Bible, you have all this stuff that happened before then. So we know a little bit about Moses from the Bible, but if you read these other books, you learn all about Moses and Enoch and Methuselah, and these men are all related. and going back this like 10 or 12 generations from Adam, it's all in there. And then among the thousands of parchment there's the Book of Enoch, copies and copies of it, and the Book of Giants. So the story is that there's these sky gods.
What he's introducing here is the origin story behind the giants, not from Earth, but from above.
And this story, for people who know it, is going to track exactly with the Anunnaki. It's going to track right with it. This Bible story is going to track right with it.
The Anunnaki are figures from ancient Mesopotamian mythology, often interpreted by alternative theorists as advanced beings who interacted with early humans. The overlap between these stories is why some believe different cultures are describing the same events.
So you've got these sky gods, and they send watchers down to Earth, and their job is to shepherd and guide humans, teach them animal husbandry and agriculture and all that stuff.
At first, these beings are described as helpers, guiding early human civilization.
But the watchers become corrupt and fascinated with human women. And Hecklefish says, oh, that's not going to end well. And it didn't. So the watchers, who are probably angels, they interbreed with humans, and then their offspring are the Nephilim. And the Nephilim are they're giants. In some books, they're 350 feet tall. They're vicious. They're violent. They're cannibals. And these are the unholy offspring of the angels and humans.
The Nephilim are briefly mentioned in Genesis, but expanded heavily in the Book of Enoch, where they're described as hybrid beings whose existence disrupts the natural order.
So the giants now they're ravaging the world, and they're just making a mess of things.
According to the story, this is when humanity loses control of the world.
And that's when God decides it's got to stop. We got to start over. And then he wipes it away with the flood.
This is the same flood narrative that appears across multiple ancient cultures.
But the Book of Enoch expands on all of that and has Enoch going up to heaven to speak to God. And that's heresy to say, because heaven's not supposed to be a place. Like, mortal man can't go to heaven. It certainly can't come back, but Enoch did. And he was specifically taken there. I think he was taken there by Uriel and taken up there in a chariot of fire.
Uriel is described in apocryphal texts as an archangel associated with knowledge and divine revelation, often acting as a guide between realms.
And then Enoch is walking around heaven, but he's describing a place where he's seeing tall beings of light going about their business, and the walls are covered with how he describes as emeralds that are just blinking lights on and off.
Listen closely to how he describes this. It starts to sound less like clouds and more like structure.
And he talks about how he can see all of the earth, and he describes how he can see how the winds are made, and I can see every lake and river on the earth. And when you think of heaven, you think of clouds in the sky, but Enoch said that there's a roof, there's a ceiling, and everything is shiny.
Some modern interpretations suggest Enoch's descriptions resemble advanced technology, viewing Earth from above, enclosed environments, and luminous structures.
And what it sounds like he's describing is a spacecraft, if you read the book. Like, if you read the book through a modern lens, it's like, this guy is on a UFO, is where Enoch is.
This is where ancient text gets reinterpreted through a modern lens.
So he's up there, and they take him all around the cosmos. And this is all in the book. He describes the solar system, and he's told the Earth goes around the sun in 364 days, which we weren't supposed to know any of that then in the Book of Enoch.
That's what makes this controversial. The claim that advanced knowledge appears far earlier than expected.
And then he's given a directive from God to go take this message down to the Nephilim and the Watchers that, if you don't get your shit together, it's going to get bad down here. And they ignore the order, and that's when the flood comes.
Flood stories appear in dozens of cultures, from the Bible to the Epic of Gilgamesh, often describing a reset of humanity after widespread corruption.
And then only one man is chosen to survive the flood, and that's Enoch's grandson, and that's Noah. And that's where the Noah's Ark story comes from. But it tracks pretty closely with the Anunnaki story and the cataclysm. And it tracks a little bit with the Epic of Gilgamesh and Utnapishtim and the flood there.
The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest known texts, also describes a great flood and a chosen survivor, reinforcing how widespread this narrative is across civilizations. If so many cultures tell the same story, at what point does it stop being coincidence? Drop a comment below and consider subscribing for more content.